The names of the people, the sciences are and have been used remotely from off those locations. There are proofs since semi-ancient times. And this is relative to where and to how they sensed you Americans, others. But Americans, when you were little kids, some of you remember, some of you remember, you discerned how sickly distinctly a breaching method hurt the Native Americans and the colonists that were behind it. I mean, in the countries that were behind the colonists. They didn't want that because it's unnatural. And but we pay attention already. Countries A through Z, names A through Z, even Native Americans against Native Americans, even though there wasn't America. Already, everyone's education had been forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded from off those locations, incapable of defending more and more abridged sciences, voices, and affording to be, let alone to protract. And that there are proofs that was influenced from off, but was sustained from off the campuses, or equivalent anyway, because the way it knew it, at all locations, it could affect roles with itself, because it made all locations, areas, and states forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to blame other things, others, or selves, even when correctly, for what things that it caused, like countries A through Z, to be self-guided roles being used remotely, systems tactical ulterior from that volume science that shows us that we are a human species individual body, individual from other species bodies, a human species body of individual bodies, with all group differences demonstrating that body of that is what that identity of relativity. I'm not going to say God because then it brings up a name or something that's invisible but still discernible. I'm saying hyper invisible but still. The parts of speech are invisible but still discernible. Any subject is invisible but still discernible. Even if it is made up, art has the identity of that is the finite, while it is not, but it is coming to, from, as, with, and for all things, while it's not by any way. Because part of its complete nature is not here, but it is here anyway. It is inseparable from all things. And we could separate ourselves from its system, hyper-native pure, but it will force our special difference from here, as forced space-nature transfer, as it's a special difference to be, where it's already relativity to positive and negative equally. But it is, already, but it is a quality diffusion, making more of it its identity of forever nature. This is not, I'm not saying faith. I'm saying this is most practical and most probably what is being demonstrated to us by nature. Having black people as white bodies is about relativity. And a whole bunch, everything is about relativity / hyper-relativity. See, offensively, people are pretending that we need theory. We need to learn ways that we don't learn. People are exploiting the phenomenon of having captive subjects. The reason why we have to have Americans educated is so they understand the principles of reason. The first principle is James Madison's plan. And to understand, and then George Washington agreed to how, and we're directed to refer to our founders plural as James Madison singular. And then they went and got George Washington to agree to help them and use that plan. And that plan was to counter-extort the other founders. Everyone was roles with everyone else's fact, human nature, torture, extortion, and slavery. And sickly distinctly, while sickly non-distinctly too, for science that was also using all that and other that no one was paying attention to. Had black entrenched laws against black northern and southern colonies, sickly distinctly against everyone. That same breaching method against Native Americans. There are proofs since before Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Ugh. So basically 1500. In other words, the suburbs, there were houses built before America's founders were even born, and they didn't have free speech. James Madison's plan had to force counter extortion. There were internationally monitored conversations and companies and roles with that. As the value nature system replaced as economy. Economies leaving out nature's complete and system of communications with ourselves, leaving out the mass identity theft, fraud, slanders, predicate acts with facts, roles, the names with passions and emotions, speaking about crimes, have and have had. When did New York City, those people behind the people in the rap videos, trying to figure out how to say that they're angry about it, which if they're not, there's something wrong with them. The suburbs were designed tactically to nature, to cause negative value nature progressions, acts in nature, while being a landscape theater, showing the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts in nature's more and more to self-value collusion /S with criminal insidious natures of positive treatments like fact treatments, truth treatments, with the worst roles, with the worst use /S of all locations, areas, and states, worst negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Then it showed them how to. This showed you guys how to read the communications of our founders, which nature shows us is simultaneously greater than and more finite than what is said, what is communicated. That's why we're supposed to have rules followed, basic rules and principles. Of nature debate doesn't regard if the expert is wrong, they're supposed to admit it, let alone give a motive, even if true, to pretend not to realize the significance of not just criminal foreign influences. What is slavery about? Criminal foreign influences, but it's also about hyper criminal foreign influences, because they had it in sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, north and south. And though it's also hyper negative, that no one ever addressed how, even though it was sickly distinctly, it was also sickly non-distinctly, north and south, forced by a foreign preaching method. See, but rather than make blame wrong with guilt, it was Spain or it was England. They didn't and don't have possession of their name. All exceptions. In other words, why they have that accent, trying to remember the history of English proper. They don't remember the history of English proper. Because this preaching method knew effectively it could torture, extort, in fact, human nature enslave, therefore physically enslave. The phenomenon of the names of countries A through Z, by forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading them to self-value the use /S of the name of the system, that the identity that the scientists share, and where and how they appear not to. It comes with demonstration /S of the same thing, /S, which is also how part of itself, the identity of all space /existence, is not. It will not mix with our temporary value /value lasting value /value progression, our quality of diffusion, where how we are relativity to positive and negative equally, but as a quality of diffusion per its system, though, it's replaced by our own at A through Z. And even though there are real causes of it now, we never addressed how they were. The only reason they were real, before they were real, the breaching method made it real. They weren't real, but they were acted on as if they were real. So those people did belong to this. The body is killing itself, the human species body of individual bodies. Even though we have means to traverse the earth, The suburbs look almost exactly the same in America, in Russia, and Ukraine. Everyone's killing each other. Everyone speaks about negotiations, economies. You guys have, without understanding how that economy was forced, pretend things are debatable that are not, getting away with it by self-valuing. The sciences, including like American history, read criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. There's a Christina Sioka recorded involved with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, takes on American history as collusion/S, with organized crimes mixed per a method singular by that, right through administrations and right through world wars, World War I and World War II. And think about it. If the Civil War was 1860 to 1865, per dictionary definition of it. If a person, male or female, was born in 1860, and that person would live to be 100 years old, they die in 1960, right before the Vietnam War. America still did not have possession of it, and still, James Madison's plan is what caused the Civil War. But rather than have that knowledge of good and evil proper, cared for, correlation, a principle, American understanding, appreciated, it's retracted. So this preaching method can measure and maintain there being and having been at all identities and natures of campuses, all ages and natures of them, including medical and fire campuses. Collusion/S there, or right back to all location/S, where it made collusions not just as that. And the difference of there, because this preaching method knew that one of the things that nature itself would show us is that a human fact human nature preaching method, singular, is one of the things that was behind how slavery had been entrenched, northern colonies and southern colonies, and how it had been and still is entrenched in such an insidious way, where they pretend things are debatable that are not, like why and how. We have to understand the breaching method against Native Americans first. And that begins before Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. It looks clearer than day that and how. It is plausible to theorize. It's probably more in many ways more practical even to Quebec, even if it was wrong. But I'm pretty sure it's right that they took down mountains, ones in Africa, and to change the nature, to begin people blaming other things, others themselves, for what a breaching method was doing. And then it showed them that they have to hide that. And it showed them each age of themselves. This is multi-front, measuring where we are going to be. This preaching method knew that every leader would have to ignore how truths were used for lies. There are great sacrifices to people that are the only people that could help leaders, that they make and have to make, like police. See, but it's not like, in other words. But these are identities of law. Not by accident, don't forget, they have failed, Black people. They have not spoken for the law, but the way the breaching method employed. Same thing with the judges and prosecutors involved with the same house/S and wire crimes. Fake conversations we had at the police station when I was a kid and then as an adult, as police and as the news at the same time. It attached me to fake conversations with themselves. These are also people that pretended I said that everyone was evil. And in the fake conversations they pretended about me, also forging names of other doctors. These are also people that use their own differences and other people's differences. Black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Italian theme, Latino themed, sexual themed. These are not legitimate roles with the government and the intelligence tied to them, and the intelligence tied to them at countries A through Z. They're criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw suits and ties, counters, exceptions, valuing their differences, who likes each other, not pretend other. Systems tactical terror from the human species body of individual bodies. All group differences are being generated by that which has birds and fish with two eyes as means to discern. You know, the fish and the birds, they aren't criminally foreign influenced. Humanity is. The birds and the fish, they aren't self-value, haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign. Oh, but I'm wealthy. You guys miss. The suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. In other words, better than free, we could have built better. In other words, it's designed to keep, in other words, the whole ocean is polluted and we don't have fresh water. The narratives of nature would be tough. Be tough. In other words, they can't afford to have discerned, right? The suburbs are designed for torture, extortion, slavery, everyone. Specifically to have everyone keep blaming what that caused too on other things, others themselves. And then styles of it, needs of it, natures of it. Anyone's going to pretend others. This is why, how many Americans tried to use how we have black people as whites of eyes? Even if they didn't say that. They're trying to use how we know only, so we need a word like badios to replace bullshit. Only criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments. Hyper criminally foreign influenced. So hyper criminal insidiousness. I'm not a lawyer, thank God. The lawyers are involved with this. There are a bunch of lawyers, increasing amounts tied to a Trantola, and news locations where they advertise that. Like WFSB involved planting fake conversations with me, with themselves and with others, and about the World Trade Center attack. No. Gary Sasso had a girlfriend that worked for an investigator with DCF, and she had another boyfriend at the same time who was involved with the prisons. And Central Connecticut State University has rules of people who work with the prisons, including foreign and domestic military. Now, these are roles with foreign and domestic, medical too. Ones with badges and gavels and their family members. Involved with wire crimes with the same houses, identity thefts, frauds, slanders. They're putting fake conversations with people also to cover up their roles with predicate acts with facts and databases, pretended little illusions in the databases. So increasingly, there are people with the name Lombardo who are further involved with and Leahy, with people from my area who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved next to Harvard Hospital with predicate acts with them, identity theft frauds, and with relative delusions. Now, these are also judges and prosecutors switching sequences and refusing to get on paper in one name and sequence. These are ones personally and professionally involved with other courts and names at and next to the corrections offices and at next to the state judicial branch offices. Wethersfield Pizza, like for example, Wethersfield Pizza House has a Stephen Stocco involved with people. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by the people involved with the identity theft, fraud, slanders with the police with them, falsified police report. Police faked me at being at the police station with them as a kid and then as an adult, and it wasn't at all. And the kids who did go there and communicate with them were our ones recorded between the campuses planting identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake exceptions of why people are around each other, lies about it. These are people with the courts switching and forging names. A whole bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court and Harper Courts and Connecticut District Court have rules with the Board of Education and a Michael Emmett with digital crimes, with child offenders, including sexual and medical, and further with a whole bunch of people with Hartford Hospital's Institute of Living, and with the medicine there, and with the with the lawyers there too, but medicines too, and their roles with the unmarked police forms and intelligence next to them through time. Eric Jensen, one of the ones who recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed state police, interstate, and people associated with him as former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members and their neighbors, like on Dearborn Street in Newington. They were involved with also the educators of Eric Jensen. He lied about himself to me and to others. And like people that are involved with next to those educators' houses, planted evidences. Ray Colo and Joe DeMoro. And I don't even know the people that on the sides of the parks. And then years later, on the other side of Millwoods Park, a Joe Allo recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. In other words, I never saw him at Millwoods Park. On the side, he was on the side with a former mayor, Gold. I never had a word of conversation with him. He's increasingly involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes, and people from Whiting Forensics involved with a Bob Chase and a Phil Colo with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, and digital and religious spots with their pretending passions and emotions, with the interbranch forging and switching names, involved with the such. New Britain Superior Court made rape threats on their Facebook page. Then they were influenced to make it look like they were doing passion crime, making a whole bunch of new Facebook pages. But that's because the former director of the FBI and the courts were hiding what I caught them doing with the DCF and with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and foreign and domestic military involved also with the corrections officers and the sexual circles, because this breaching has roles with an identity theft, fraud, slander against every single person. And so if they want forgiveness, in other words, this branch of government, they're refusing to identify. They don't want forgiveness because once it comes out on paper, they've been sticking fake things in the databases at the courts. They've been blaming each other exactly with the breaching of they controlled their fights since they were kids, including faked and changed transcripts, including wire with the police. There are people with the name Spada and Walters involved with agencies, with phone companies, and with the town offices through time. Therefore, all kinds of legal things. They painted themselves in the corners, and the breaching method showed them this. That's why they have this Michael Emmett, who has been obligated to confess and demonstrate what's actually recorded. He has delusions too, though, not realizing also. But these are not legitimate roles with what they're directed to hide lies. That's another thing demonstrated. On a mass scale, people use the right to lie, but they don't have the right to lie. Like change and fake what people say. And in other words, and put your fake emotions, your fake more even when you have real emotions, because you're painting your kids into it. Increasingly, WTNH has roles all along Route 175 and corners of it. People across the street from Manassas, Paul Kelly and his neighbors are increasingly involved with sexual and medical offenders, with the Air Force too, and with their some Marines people. There's a Pat Vincent involved with a Fred Grisette, involved with retired police chiefs and their intimate ties, involved with the same house, involved with sexual and medical offenders, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. They're educators in the background because they're putting fake things out. But sometimes the other people, everyone's just, you guys have obligations to get things on paper too, because there are more people involved with guns, threats, and poisons. And the fire department, there's an Inspector Mike who's refusing to identify himself. He has roles with an Officer Jerry Miller too, and Officer Jerry Miller recorded on and confessed on Facebook, which is a federal crime to lie about that. He has collusions on the planting evidences on digital and on the side of my house. He was pretending I was growing marijuana. I was not growing marijuana. And he's one of the ones involved too. I in response to it, he's involved with. I didn't bring up the sexual, but he has sexual and medical. He rolls with a. There are more people with a Leahy family with pictures of the kids on Facebook, involved with digital crimes with judges and prosecutors changing and faking what digital evidence is, as collusions with sexual and medical offenders, and some black KKK Confederate flag theme, a Mark Violet with this Joshua recorded confessed demonstrated confirmed Joshua Schumack and is also involved with him. He repeated the name Joshua Schumack to me. He has roles with the military next to the state capitol through time. Also, with John Mayano does, and a whole bunch of people that were two. They have the mentally challenged people, for example, too. In the syntax, they're being attacked to keep them as predators too. Where they have the people on Elm Street when I was a kid, and then as an adult. Increasingly, 2 times I had two cooking classes. People from other areas were planting evidences with people on my street, involved with behavior racketeering too. These people at Harvard Hospital's Institute of Living, with their kids, involved with them with various natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders. There are more than one people with the name Brendan Leahy. And now say there are prosecutors, judges, and their kids that are collusions at the same time with the same house. /S, the ones near me too. And they brought this up. They're also lying about the sequences. These are also people involved with the Scalora family and with the police that won't identify themselves. One guy forced him through my door and said, "Stay away from the Scalora." The Scalora has been pretending he knows me with police in courts in foreign countries since I was a kid. I found out he's the cousins of one of the houses involved with the police with sexual and medical offenders when I was a kid. Now as an adult. Not against me, but against me too. They have rape threat against me on New Britain Superior Court. In other words, they use the right to lie, but they don't have the right to lie. They already invested people's whole careers, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, wrong. They need to get on paper. Now they can't. That's why we have to pay attention to this, because it shows that not only how that we have people that we have to be retrained. Nature itself will show them how to think. But you have to understand James Madison's plan. And this is before he was a president. And while he was a president, how could he have free speech? The breaching method still had slavery entrenched North and South. He didn't want that. You guys have him praying. And you have self-value roles with it. Names of the people of sciences. Oh, well, that's ridiculous. That's extreme. You guys are collusions. BB, you and that Jeffrey Sachs are collusions. You guys are sick. Delusions are up. But we could change this. But you got to get the judges and prosecutors that have been speaking with them to fix the fake records with the news at the same time. Different news companies, different ways. WFSB, fake conversations with them. WTNH, they planted evidences with people. Identity theft, fraud, slanders, predicate acts with facts at crime scenes from the past. They are shown. They need to hide active, and they need to hide things to come. Their family members too. Increasingly, there are journalists and their family members involved with Central Connecticut State University, involved all around along Franklin Avenue in Hartford, for example, and along the Burlington Turnpike before the heart of Hartford. Same ones involved with next to Hartford Hospital with the Demorals Market used to be there for years, where it is now too. Is involved with a Paul DeMorrow, with all kinds of wire crimes. And per his brothers, John DeMorrow has roles. I only had one conversation in my life over the phone. He's involved too with them with digital crimes, with sexual and medical offenders of little kids, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Involved also with the educators of a John DeMorrow and their roles with the security. They have a security, something to do with their roles with the intelligence at Town Line Drive through time. And like with a Mike Pandol people tied to a Mike Pando, increasingly people from other areas that sought me out as strangers, record, capacity, demonstrate, confirm things. In other words, I mind my business in life, but these are the people involved, intercities, before the World Trade Center attack and every year since, involved with the people that are using them what they already put there. I'm trying to get them on paper, one name and sequence. These are increasingly people at next to body dumping spots, concluding if any of that or any of that stuff was made up, like the untimely deaths, like one at Trinity College. These are people that's in Hartford, Connecticut. These are people on Wethersfield, Connecticut, on my street that used to be living here, and people from other areas who got involved with that. And they made time confessions about it and demonstrations of the same house tied to one years ago with different people living at the house at the same time. But it has something to do with my past neighbors' conversations with them, with the people that moved into the Halpern house. They're involved with, identity theft, fraud, slanders, police, and court switching and forging names with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. It's nothing personal. We don't even know each other. That was the only time that we had communication. It was nonverbal. These are also increasingly people involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with nonverbal confirmation demonstrations to me in a 2006 district court private case. One of the cases involved with a whole bunch of different cases, totally different natures of cases, with names on both sides of the cases in the courts, in the news tied to it, had collusions against me personally. And, I try to mind my own business too. That's how I knew a lot of these things. Like Robert Rodriguez, he sought me out. Only time I remember him from years ago. And I didn't say anything. On Route 3, he's one of the names on all sides of a religious spot on Route 3, with some foreign and domestic military, criminally foreign influence, tactical illusions wrought with their educators, putting predicate acts and facts in databases. But as a certain type of victim / hyper victim being influenced to it from off campuses, but also not knowing. But see, but they have the style, needs, and natures directed to have different kinds of experts respond to things. That's where they're confessing things too. That's where we have to communicate with the intelligence is really communicating, because they're refusing to identify themselves, so they're leaking these things. I wouldn't be directing what I know about former director of the FBI, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act, and his co-defendants, Thaddeus Grabowski, is involved at Fox Connect with people at Fox Connecticut News and next to them, intelligence next to them. Also with a Mike DeMay, with people who and his educators involved with sexual and medical offenders, and of a girl on my area, where they call attacks on themselves too. And if they don't get the response they want, when they make religious charge, disgusting language and nature's demonstrations of themselves, like a pig. People, Miss Riley, repeating about how a neighbor I never met when she was a little girl had been kissing her boyfriend. And these are people, she's involved with Anthony Agman too, on Facebook, with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, and his confessions regarding his roles with medical offenders of kids, and identity theft, fraud, slanders with him, federal evidence crimes with Wethersfield police. He has roles with some Mendez police that attached me to fake conversations with them at the police station, one of the Mendez police. Never had a word of conversation with him there. He pretended I had a conversation with him. And he replaced that fake falsified police report. Bob Chase said there was another falsified police report with a Phil Cololo on it, PHIL. And he's involved with a Bob Chase from Whiting Forensics. Also with digital crimes with a Joshua Julian, also on the Facebook pages of the campuses, also with judges and prosecutors and their family members and medical families, foreign and domestic, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. And they have rules with the construction and all the things to do. They have people with the unions too, and next to the unions also involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. of also the daughter of a John LeConte, a Don LeConte. I never had a word of conversation with her in my life. They apparently took a picture. They planted a fake exception. They know they recorded. It's recorded today. That's what they were and are communicating to me. A Don LeConte is involved also with Hamden, Connecticut. And I don't know if they're doing, in other words, I don't even know Heather Hanson's brother's names, but they know my name. And her mother and father know my name. I think her father's name is Bruce Hanson. And her neighbors are also involved with my neighbors, with the Wethersfield Police Department through time, and with the courts and the judicial branch of and the founding locations. People at Trinity College recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with my past neighbors, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, to collusion /S, also with the Joshua Stryker at Trinity College, with involved with the Rake Law. I never saw them together. Eric Oliveri sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm things about his roles with UPS and with the judicial branch offices, and with various natures of federal crime, evidences crimes, identity, fraud, slanders. And his conversations are demonstrated to me. I don't know where I never had any conversation. He said Wall Street to a teacher I had. He was put in that class with me. And that part of the school is increasingly involved with foreign and domestic intelligence, with identity theft, fraud, slaying, putting fake ties, fake natures of ties between people, and with their roles with the same house /S from other areas, as the ones with their cousins, like named Scalora, involved with the spots next to the World Trade Center, like the court next to it, with names on all sides of that, next to a CCSU magnet school on Franklin Avenue and along Franklin Avenue. See, Central Connecticut State University has roles with placing people at campuses. But these are people with UConn too. There are lawyers from UConn, intelligence from UConn, people with the name Violet, people involved with the roles with the narratives by criminal enterprises like Los Solitos. The former director, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. He has digital crimes with them, and with some courts switching and forging names, and in the Ninth Circuit Court switching in sequence from inside the court, and names on both sides of that case and their sources were brought up with predicate acts against me, with people intercities who were planting predicate acts on my campuses, intercities and intra-cities. And they forced the principal child abuser I caught involved with him and with others with worse than they put him in jail for, since before he was put in jail. And they had tried to charge me with harassment for calling back. They brought up all kinds of messages on my message machine, put all kinds of more and stacked on more and more fake things. These are people just changing and faking what's actually digitally and phones recorded, and at the Wethersfield Police Department through time. Increasingly, there was a modern pastry and a Mazzucato bakery. They have a Mayan family who's confessing, recording, demonstrating them involved with this. Also with the houses named Colo and people further involved with medical offenders of kids. Rick Cianfaglione also sought me out to confess, demonstrate, record, confirm that. He's involved with a Timothy O'Brien, Andrew O'Brien, Dennis O'Brien, others with the state capitol and with their neighbors. In other words, they make fake ties to people, make fake exceptions. They can't afford to have discern what's discerned. These are people that have been putting from other classes, putting fake things in databases and lying about their motivations for it. And they're increasingly involved with it. And I can't get a name on paper since I was a kid. When you go to the courts, they make confessions and they switch names and sequences and stack more predicate acts with facts. The Britain Superior Court has a bunch of people directly and indirectly involved with intelligence families that used to live in my street, with the ones that are still in the area, involved with Smith and Colo, per them too, and per the police that brought up the name Scalora too, which brought up their past confessions with the DeMoro too. And you guys are changing and faking what's recorded while you're attached to me to fake conversations at the police department with the police when I was a kid and I was an adult That was you guys recording your collusion slash us personally and professionally with the ones named Scalora. With the ones named Kalal and Smith and Scalora. But multiple police departments, and O'Brien, multiple police departments are through time involved with predicate acts with them, haven't been used remotely criminally for influence. We're not going to leave out the black people's rights of lives. How the identities of law have guilt here. Because, in other words, as hard as it is to do, it's much harder on the black people in the cities. This is not about black or white. This is about addressing how the suburbs are designed tactically to nature, and who denies it will have inherent to it, active to and progressive to their logic demonstrations of the same. But we have that not appreciated, and we have that tortured if it is addressed, because we have other pretended legitimate reality experts. You don't leave out James Madison's principle, his method of forcing the rest of the founders to get the Constitution unabridged, to get slavery done, and to get ourselves demonstrated why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them, let alone. So they pretend they have the right to ask the questions where they don't have the right to ask the question. They use the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. A breaching method trained them. A through Z. How and why we're having problems at Straits and we have to have commerce. It's because all the jobs at countries A through Z were influenced by a breaching method that's not even the name A through Z, specifically so could keep A through Z, blaming A through Z for what it caused, for what it keeps, and then for what that causes and keeps. Also, it measured and maintained all styles, needs, and natures to blame other things. We're talking about the industry, like the negotiations involves intelligence bodies involved with psychiatry, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. In other words, offensively affront to our constitutional rights. They refuse to identify themselves. All excuses. They use criminally foreign influence too. They can't do it on paper legitimately. So they have to value how there are a whole bunch of ways. They have rackets where they have subject treatments formally with the law and privately with the law. Collusions. But the difference of that is used remotely criminally foreign influence too, where it is appreciated, where and how we are syntax nature, where and how we have been appreciated, not unabridged, not by one. Otherwise, that body was sentenced, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was everybody. We all have discerned many ways. In other words, they want to make it. We can't force our kids to go to. We're not supposed to force. Our founders didn't want us to force the kids to go to school so they could do activities with other kids, and take potluck on who's there, and then have kids plotting because they were doing identity theft fraud. Saying kids aren't even in the same classrooms. Kids that don't even know each other, but through other people's names, repeating fake things, other than they get arrested. In other words, the courts have been collusions at crime scenes. Increasingly, a Mark Violet is involved with people from other areas with various natures of organized crimes on my street, with judges and prosecutors. People from Yukon involved with drugs crimes, medicines crimes, and pretending to be against it and next to Harvard Hospital. With this Justin Klavinskis too. Where he lived in the past and where he lives now, and people next to it. All along roads and routes. Increasingly, people from Central Connecticut State University, too. I don't know, this Parker English changed and faked what I said in databases. Has something to do with the names involved with the World Trade Center attack and the Saudi attackers and his roles with, if that was him on Walker Hill Road, there's a woman and her daughter involved with the intelligence community, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and the World Trade Center attack, the Saudi attackers. And our side is used remotely by also a hyper foreign that uses the North and South remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions drop when they speak on difference /s, therefore on names. Why and how we're at a whole bunch of people are hungry and every place has been tactically denatured. We're in the same breaching method trap. And to appreciate it, you don't let go. And they admit why president /chief. Because our founders plural behind James Madison. And and in other words, until we get the Constitution on a bridge, the Native Americans should not understand that. In other words, they should understand that the reason it's abridged Constitution, the reason they're not appreciated by the identities, the laws syntactically properly, is relative to how our founders' communications are being and have been replaced. The breaching method is removed. It is replaced right from the communications of James Madison and the founders behind him and his plan. And then of George Washington, who agreed to help them and to use that plan. And the founders as the presidents, which is distinct from our founders, plural. And James Madison's plan that was to counter-extort at key locations, make people break the crazy fact human nature laws a little bit, and then have no ways to defend themselves. No way to defend themselves without relying upon James Madison's plan and the unity behind them, not just George Washington. George Washington and his leftover soldiers weren't capable of being that unity that James Madison and his plan provided to counter internationally entrenched and monitored conversations, and way worse, being and having been using such since some ancient times, measured and maintained incapable of affording to be, let alone to protract, short words with convictions proper by the sciences that shows them standing reach. Who disbelieves? Please tell I thank you. So that's why we can't stop trying to trade and negotiate. But we're also not supposed to stop. We're also supposed to start not pretending that those negotiations didn't contain criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence collusion / S at all locations / S. In other words, how long are we going to watch examples? Oh, look, I made it. It's the point that there's no science on the suburbs how they're denatured, let alone on the city. Fake sciences. Anyone tries to, in other words, this breaching method it shows everyone how they have to do the same thing it has to do. Keep other things others themselves blamed for why and how there's no integrity of sciences, including the people of the sciences. It shows them themselves how they have to use their knowledge of good and evil. To use a phrase from the beginning of the Old Testament, no, out of sequence from the part that says in the Old Testament, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together. In the part that comes before it, nobody even knows that part about it, because everyone has roles with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, and criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, fact, human nature, quality aspects in nature, where again replaced from the communications of our founders. Was this what they communicated? Replaced right from their communications. Was this human fact, human nature breaching method itself? Nature itself too shows us a human fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things that is true always. What the value of those laws were, and rules with upstanding, calling that order, northern colonies, southern colonies, northern states, southern states. It was value as criminal and citizens nature. It was value as collusions / hyper collusion. The breaching method hides behind the collusions, plural. The styles, needs, and nature, pretend they have free speech or anyone else does. To an extent, otherwise that body is sense. And that is adapted to, including if that body is an entire country, A through Z, any grouping of countries to counter what this causes and keeps while still being locations, areas, and states self-value too. where and how being used remotely. Because no one fathomed where and how that is used remotely, criminally foreign influence. All location/s. That's why your ass can't follow mandated law. In other words, increasingly their intelligence people tied to a Michael Emmett and the processes involved with the schools, and they're lying. They're attaching the kids to to fake and change communications with everyone around them. Little magic tricks with it too, and they're building on that with the ones that are shown 2 years later. They can't afford to have what's actually recorded, actually the way it is, to be discerned syntactically. In other words, there are psychopaths takes on some voices with calmness as the ones who could control, force everyone to listen to principles of speech. See, those principles have stayed broken, criminally foreign, tactically delusions, wrought political principles that are not even politics, that were just shown to cause it. The breaching method showed them how to speak about things and call things politics. We all hunger through systems where we can't feed ourselves the way we have it unless we you rely on trade as is, standards as is. That's what happens when you leave out with James Madison and replace. Have roles be replacing self while we're pretending other, being used remotely, replacing with James Madison. And our founders communicated about the economies. So there was a breaching method entrenched. They had to start from nowhere. We're in trouble. Because that breaching method, it read clearer than day, deciphered for us what our founders communicated to us, and appreciated that and got over on us through our own experts on, like the Racketeering Influence of Corrupt Organization Act. Can't defend their syntax with that, their nature with that, and afford, to groupings proper of criminal enterprises of terrorists. They had roles, the agencies and the FBI, with the World Trade Center attack, foreign and domestic military. Their roles were difference, racketeering worse than war crimes. Their roles of torture, extortion, slavery method, 3 ways manifest. I tell best, don't replace what is coming to show you how they're replacing it. They're pretending things are debatable that are not. They're getting away with it for roles with the database side. But that's also forgiveness, is because there were also a whole bunch of different countries and overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and now terrorists too at the same time, with timed collusion/s that can be used to show that there's also hyper-foreign involved still. But you have to follow mandated law to do this. Watch.